This prison guard exposed a secret and the system tried to silence him. If you're brave enough to know what really happens inside these walls, subscribe, like, and hold on tight, because this story goes darker than you think. The blood-red emergency lights pulsed against the concrete walls of North Haven Correctional Facility as officers crowded around the administrative hallway. Radios buzzed with scrambled orders, boots hammered against steel flooring, and every door on the tier slammed shut in rapid succession. But the chaos wasn't coming from the cell blocks. It was coming from the administrative wing, the one place in a prison where trouble wasn't supposed to erupt. Officer Daniel Rourke stood at the center of it all, breathing hard, hands trembling. He had just discovered something he was never meant to see. And now every alarm in the building was reacting to his next move. Moments earlier, he had walked into the control office to submit a routine incident report. The room had been empty, unusual for that time of day. A monitor had been left on, its cursor blinking over an open file titled, Revised Staffing Summary. When Daniel leaned forward, the report shifted on its own, revealing a second page that wasn't supposed to exist. It contained a list of staffing numbers for the past 6 months. Numbers that didn't match reality. North Haven had been dangerously understaffed for months, forcing officers to work triple shifts and cover units they weren't trained for. Incidents had increased. Response times had slowed. The danger to staff and inmates climbed higher every week. Yet on paper, everything looked smooth, orderly, well-staffed, and fully compliant. Someone had falsified the reports. And they had been doing it for a long time. Daniel captured a photo with his phone, a split-second decision that changed everything. As he stepped back, a voice behind him snapped, "What are you doing here?" It was Lieutenant Marlowe, the shift commander. A man known for icy discipline and an uncanny ability to appear where he wasn't expected. Daniel tried to speak, but Marlowe stepped closer, blocking the door. "You weren't assigned to this office. You aren't authorized to review administrative files." I came to file a report," Daniel stammered. Marlowe's gaze dropped to Daniel's phone, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop with it. "Hand it over." Daniel didn't. Instead, he backed toward the hallway. That's when Marlowe reached for his radio, not to call for assistance, but to lock the building down. Now alarms screamed, officers rushed in confusion, and Daniel's name was suddenly being whispered across the intercom like he'd committed a crime instead of uncovering one. He pushed through the crowd and slipped into a narrow service corridor, the only place not yet swarming with responding staff. The concrete walls echoed with noise as he pressed his back to the cold surface, trying to slow his breathing. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a message from a coworker he trusted. "They know you saw something. Get out of there now." The words hit him harder than any fist could. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a minor disciplinary problem. The system was closing in on him. He made his way toward the staff exit, keeping to the shadows. But as he reached the door, he spotted 2 supervisors waiting outside, not looking around, not responding to the alarms, just standing there as if they were expecting him. He turned back down another hall. That's when he saw it. A shredded document lying near the copy machine in the administrative lobby, half buried under a stack of old memos. He bent down, hands shaking, and lifted the torn page. It showed 2 columns. Actual staffing. Reported staffing. The differences weren't small. They were intentional. Someone had been covering up months of understaffing by altering official state records. Someone high enough to demand reports be rewritten and low enough to keep it quiet. And then Daniel noticed something else, a signature at the bottom of the page. Quickly scribbled, almost hidden in the corner. Before he could finish reading it, a voice echoed behind him. "Brooke, you weren't supposed to find that." He froze. Footsteps moved closer. Slow, heavy, deliberate. He turned the page over, and his stomach dropped. There was a second signature. A name he never expected to see. A name from someone who had always warned him to stay quiet about departmental problems. His own captain. The footsteps grew louder. He had seconds left. Daniel hid the page under his jacket and moved toward the emergency stairwell. He wasn't just holding evidence now. He was holding the truth behind a system that wanted to bury it. And the people who wanted it buried were already hunting him. He didn't know it yet, But the second document he grabbed wasn't supposed to exist, and once he opened it, everything he thought he knew about North Haven would unravel. The stairwell was colder than the rest of the building, as if the air had slipped in from some place outside the prison walls entirely. Daniel moved down the concrete steps, every footfall swallowed by the blare of distant alarms and the low roar of confusion above. His heart hammered against the folded document under his jacket. He didn't look at it again until he reached the small, forgotten break room on the service level. The room smelled like burnt coffee and old dust. A flickering blue vending machine cast a weak light across the cracked tiles. No cameras. No windows. Just a table, 2 plastic chairs, and a metal cabinet that might as well have been a safe now. He shut the door, slid the bolt, and finally unfolded the second document. It wasn't a staffing report. It was a log. A list of critical incidents from the past year. Assaults. Medical emergencies. Fights that had taken too long to respond to. None of that shocked him. This was a maximum security facility, after all. What did shock him was the column on the right. Classification, reported/not reported. There were check marks next to some incidents, indicating they'd been filed properly for review. Others, nothing. No mark. No acknowledgement. No paper trail. These events simply vanished from the official record as if they had never happened at all. And next to those blank entries was a name typed in small letters under Final Reviewer. Captain Elias Monroe. Daniel stared at the name for a long moment, his throat dry. Captain Monroe was the one who had recruited him out of the academy 3 years earlier. The one who told him, North Haven's rough, but if you do the job right and keep your head, you'll be fine. The same man who always changed the subject whenever someone mentioned low staffing or delayed responses. On the second page of the log, a handwritten note had been scribbled in the margin. Do not enter, resolved internally. No initials. No explanation. Just that. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail notification from a blocked number. He pressed play. Rourke, it's Jenna. Her voice was low, hurried, like she was speaking from a closet. She was one of the nurses who worked the overnight medical shift. I don't have much time. I saw your name flagged on the internal alert. They're saying you accessed restricted files. Listen to me. Whatever you found, it's connected to the incident last month in C Block. The one they say was contained. It wasn't. You know that. We both do. If you're smart, you'll drop this, but if you don't, make sure you don't keep that evidence in the building. The message cut out abruptly. Daniel replayed it twice. The incident in C Block. He remembered that night clearly. A call had gone out for backup. Response delays. Confusion on the radios. By the time the situation calmed down, the official line was that it had been minor, overblown, nothing serious. Yet he'd seen the look on Jenna's face as she walked out of medical afterward, shaken, angry, and quiet. He checked the log again. There was C Block. 3N. Response delay, 11 minutes. Classification, not reported. His hands tightened around the page. If staffing reports were falsified and critical incidents smothered on paper, how many times had North Haven hidden the truth? And how many officers and inmates had been left exposed because someone didn't want the numbers to look bad? Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside the break room. He killed the vending machine light and pressed his back against the wall, listening. 2 sets of steps. Slow. Searching. A key jangled against a ring. A voice spoke quietly. Check this one. He uses it sometimes on graveyard. Daniel didn't breathe. The door handle rattled, then stopped. Locked, someone said. Try the boiler room instead, another voice answered. He's not stupid enough to sit still. The footsteps faded. Daniel counted to 20, then turned the light back on. He couldn't stay in the building. Jenna was right. Anything he had on him could be confiscated, lost, or reinterpreted under the pretense of an internal investigation. He needed another set of eyes. Someone outside the chain of command. Someone who couldn't be ordered to forget. On the bulletin board above the table, partially covered by an old flyer, was a photocopied notice from the State Inspector General's office, a hotline for reporting misconduct and unsafe conditions anonymously. He'd seen it 100 times and ignored it like everyone else. Anonymous, he thought. He pulled his phone out, snapped clearer pictures of the documents, and then did something that made his stomach twist. He slid both originals into a plastic sandwich bag from the cabinet and tucked them into the ceiling panel above the vending machine. If they caught him with the documents, the story would end inside North Haven's walls. But if he got the information out first, he dialed the number on the notice. It rang longer than he expected. Finally, a calm voice answered, "Inspector General's office. This line is recorded. How can I help you?" Daniel hesitated. "My name is Daniel Rourke," he said. "I'm a corrections officer at North Haven. I think my prison has been lying about what's really happening inside." There was a slight pause on the other end, the kind that tells you someone just sat up straighter. "Mr. Rourke," the voice said carefully, "can you tell me exactly what you've seen?" He took a breath and started talking. He didn't know that as he spoke, in an office 2 floors above him, Captain Monroe was staring at a flashing alert on his screen, an internal notification that a staff member had just contacted an outside oversight number using a prison line. The name attached to the alert was his, Daniel Rourke, and Monroe's cursor hovered over a button that read, "Begin internal review, staff misconduct." By the time Daniel ended the call, he had no idea the system had already labeled him something else. Not a witness. Not a whistleblower. But a problem. One that needed to be handled. What he didn't yet realize was that the first person sent to interview him wouldn't be there to collect the truth, they'd be there to erase it. Daniel left the break room and stepped into the dim service corridor, his heartbeat syncing with the distant hum of fluorescent lights. The prison above him had calmed, alarms subsiding, officers returning to posts, but that false quiet only made the air feel heavier. Something had shifted. He could feel it pressing against his ribs. He headed toward the administrative stairwell, hoping to slip out before someone realized he was still inside. But halfway up the steps, a shadow appeared at the landing. Captain Monroe. Blocking the exit. "Daniel," Monroe said, voice steady, like he'd been waiting for him. "You've caused quite the commotion today." Daniel froze. "Captain, we need to talk. I found something in the reports. Something that shouldn't be." Monroe raised a hand, silencing him. "Let's not do this here. There's an interview room open downstairs. We can discuss everything privately." It wasn't a suggestion. Behind Monroe, another figure stepped into view, Internal Affairs Officer Grayson. A man known for exactly 2 things, a spotless uniform and a talent for writing reports that always protected the department. Grayson gave a thin smile. "Brooke, been looking for you." Daniel's stomach twisted. Every instinct he had screamed the same thing. Do not go with them. But they were blocking the only route out. Monroe gestured toward the lower level. "After you." Daniel stepped backward slowly, keeping both men in sight as he descended. When they reached the interview room, Grayson swiped his badge, and the door unlocked with a soft click. Inside was a metal table, 2 chairs, and a camera mounted in the corner. Except the camera's power light was off. Grayson shut the door behind them. "Have a seat," he said. Daniel remained standing. "I'd prefer this conversation be recorded." "It will be," Grayson lied smoothly. "Sit." Daniel didn't move. Why was the camera disabled? Monroe exhaled sharply, as if disappointed. "You've always been too curious for your own good." Daniel's pulse skyrocketed. Now he knew. This wasn't an interview. It was containment. Monroe stepped closer. "Whatever you think you found, you misinterpreted it. Reporting inaccurate assumptions could jeopardize your career." Daniel cut him off. "Captain, I called the Inspector General." Monroe's expression didn't change. But Grayson's did. A flicker of irritation. Then calculation. "And what exactly did you tell them?" Grayson asked. Daniel took a steady breath. "Enough." Both men exchanged a look. That was the confirmation Daniel didn't want to see. Grayson locked the door from the inside. "Let's clear something up, Officer Rourke. You accessed restricted files without authorization. You photographed internal documents. And you attempted to make an external report without following the chain of command. All of that," Monroe added calmly, "can be framed as misconduct." Daniel stepped back until he felt the wall behind him. You can twist this if you want. But the documents are safe. And someone outside the prison already knows. That wasn't entirely true. The originals were hidden. The photos were on his phone. And the Inspector General had only heard the first part of his story before he rushed to escape detection. But Monroe didn't know that. Grayson tilted his head. Safe where? Daniel simply stared. Monroe sighed, almost sadly. You were a good officer, Daniel. But you should have learned one thing early. Institutions protect themselves. Always. He reached for Daniel's arm. At that exact moment, the door burst open. 3 uniformed officers stood there, but not Monroe's men. They wore badges stamped with a different emblem. State Inspector General's office. Captain Monroe, the lead investigator said, step away from Officer Rourke. Monroe's hand fell to his side. Grayson stiffened. Daniel blinked in shock. The inspector held up a phone. We received a partial report from this line an hour ago. The call cut out, but it was enough to trigger an emergency review. We traced the signal here. And after what we found in preliminary audits, he looked between Monroe and Grayson. We have questions. A lot of them. Daniel released a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. But the inspector wasn't done. He turned to Daniel. Where are the original documents you mentioned? Daniel hesitated. He had hidden them well, but had anyone else found them? Before he could answer, another officer stepped into the doorway holding a clear evidence bag. Inside it were the 2 documents he hid above the vending machine. Found these during a sweep, the officer said. But there's something else. Someone else had already been searching the ceiling panels. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. Someone else. The inspector nodded slowly. We don't know who, he said. But whoever it was, they got there before we did. Daniel stared at the evidence bag, a chill running down his spine. If the inspector's team hadn't arrived when they did, those documents could have vanished forever. Or worse, someone could have replaced them. And then the inspector said the words that would haunt Daniel for years. Officer Rourke, the pages we recovered? They're real. But the signatures at the bottom? He paused. Were altered by someone recently. Daniel's breath caught. Altered by who? He whispered. The inspector met his eyes. We think the cover-up goes deeper than Monroe or Grayson. Much deeper. And if you want the whole truth, he nodded toward the hallway, you're not safe here tonight. Daniel stepped out of the room, heart pounding, realizing the twist he never saw coming. Exposing the secret wasn't the dangerous part. Surviving it was. If you think the story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.